Hi, my name is Ron Kester. I'm the co-chair for the advisory committee, and I want to welcome you to the second session on the flood mitigation, which is very important to all of us. What we'd like to do here is we'll have a quick welcome and project update, and then some introductions, a moderated panel, and then some Q&A at the end. Goals and objectives for today's panel is one, to provide accurate information from experts regarding the proposed flood safety plan. What we want to do is replace rumors with fact, and to clear up any misconceptions or misinformation that may be up there. One thing that we have been dedicated to is getting the information to people so that they can make informed decisions, getting timely, accurate information. Want to gain a better understanding of the FEMA flood map change process. That's always has room for confusion, and we have experts here to help us understand that. We will allow for questions from the community. What we would ask you to do, and we'll go in a minute and tell you how to do it, but give the questions through chat, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll get to the questions. We're going to provide a quick project update, and then we'll discuss the next steps. Okay, next PowerPoint. And here, for you to ask your questions, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a bar that has chat on it. Just click on chat. It'll go to our moderator, and you can ask questions to the moderator, and those questions will then be held until the last 10 minutes, and we'll answer those questions after the last 10 minutes. Some of them may be answered during the presentation. People may ask multiple questions on the same subject, but one thing that we do ask is if you could make the questions specific to the flood plan. We don't have much time today. We want to make sure we get the questions answered. If you have questions other than flood related, if you can ask them here. They'll just be held and we back to you by email, or you can go to the website and ask the questions there. Okay, next. Here's a quick project update. The golf course is open for play and regularly being maintained and improving each day. The FEMA technical review, which we'll be discussing in detail today, of the flood system plan is complete. So we'll be discussing what that means. The city is preparing the environmental impact report. If you remember, that's 17 plus sections that have to do with traffic, wildlife. Flooding is part of it. Noise, light, water usage. So all of those things that the project, how it might impact the local environment. The city is preparing that now, doing administrative changes, minor administrative changes, and hopefully they'll be releasing that in the very near future. Also, the city is preparing a golf and economic study. It's already been completed, both of them, but they're doing the administrative changes, and hopefully they'll release those at the same time they release the environmental impact report. We'll make sure that you know when both of those sections are available for review. We'll send you an email. We'll show you the link on how you can read it, so you can read it for yourself and evaluate what it says. And then there will be a comment period that the city has for that. But we'll make sure that everyone knows when it's available, because that's an important thing for the residents to read and comment on. Next slide, please. Okay. Why do we need a flood safety plan? Well, this picture, I don't know how many of you have seen it. It's a 1983 photo. It comes from the Ventura County watershed district. This was a 22-year level flood event that happened in 1983. And if you look at it, you can see the Springs homes and Courtyard homes weren't yet built. But you look over in CCV and you can see the water that had flooded in there. There's 153 homes that are in CCV that are in the floodplain and are subject to flooding. This is a 22-year flood. The plans that we're going to be discussing today mitigate a 100-year flood. And so we'll have a chance to talk about that, and then talk about how we're going to avoid this happening in the future. Okay, and next one. We have two speakers today, and we like to really thank them for taking the time to be with us, and thank New Urban West for making them available to speak with us. Both of these were contracted by New Urban West to assist with the process and doing the analysis and review that the city requires for flood mitigation and for all of the FEMA reviews. So the New Urban West is making them available so that we can get your questions answered. Mark Krebs is a professional engineer and president of PACE. PACE is the company that put together all of the analysis and all of the plans. They have over 30 years experience in engineering and construction relating to flood, highly specialized in stormwater management and flood, significant experience with FEMA in their flood insurance program regulations. They experience with CLOMR and LOMR, and we'll discuss what those mean. One's a conditional letter of map review and the other's letter of map review. We'll discuss the significance of both of those. And they have extensive experience with Southern California stormwater standards, and especially Ventura County. They've actually acted as consultants for the Ventura County Watershed District on a number of issues here in Ventura County, and are very familiar with the Camarillo situation, with the Callegas watershed as well as the Conejo watershed. Okay, next. Okay, we also have Masood Razakani with us. Masood is the founder of MRC Consulting, and he's going to help us in walking through and understanding what the FEMA process is, what LOMR means, what CLOMR means. He has 30 years of experience in floodplain analysis and hydrology. He's managed more than 2,500 LOMR requests and 400 FEMA-funded flood data updates. He served as FEMA liaison and actually helped write some of the standards for CLOMR and LOMR as a consultant to FEMA. And he is very familiar with the Ventura County area. What did we get here? I'm getting when system dialog prompts, click open link. Here we go. Okay, we're ready for the next one. Honest, I didn't touch a thing. We're going to discuss, one of the things we're going to discuss is the FEMA CLOMR process. And Masood, as we just discussed, is very well versed in this and an expert in that area. And Masood, we'd like to ask you to kind of go through the CLOMR process, what it entails and what the various terminology is, and then why it is necessary and what it does for the process.
Okay, thank you, Ron. My name is Masood Razakani. I'm an owner and principal of MRC LLC. I have over 30 years of experience working with FEMA headquarters and FEMA Region 9 out of Oakland, among other regions, as a contractor with a large engineering firms that FEMA hire to review and produce flood insurance rate map. Like Ron says, I've been involved in technical review, issuance of LOMRs and CLOMRs throughout the nation. And also I've done flood study, which is funded by FEMA for various communities, including Ventura County. I've been principal and co-principal of developing several FEMA Code of Federal Regulation, including LOMRs and CLOMRs. Well, let's start with CLOMR. What is CLOMR? As Ron said, conditional letter of map revision. FEMA established a processing procedure back in 1986 and basically helped the communities, helped the developers, applicants, if they want engineering analysis to be reviewed before the project is completed. FEMA has this processing procedure where although it's very extensive, but it really provides a good permitting process before any project is built. It includes data collection, we talk about that, application submission, FEMA review, plan changes, and finally issue of the CLOMR. Data collection, like what Mark and his team has done, is very extensive. You got to start with the actual data and analysis that FEMA has performed and used to produce the flood insurance rate map, also known as FEMA map. So you start with that. Then you go to your project, and your project may include berms, flood wall, channels, culverts, pipes, detention basins. So when you take a chunk of floodplain out for your project, like what Mark and his team has done, a lot of extensive design, analysis, data collection, it goes through this. Some of this project, my experience throughout the United States, all the 50 states and the territories, it has been somewhere between 1 to 3 years, and in some cases even more, it takes to put a project together by consulting firms. And then when that is done, then they gotta provide this application of CLOMAR to communities, and then finally to FEMA by completing several mandatory required application forms. When it gets to FEMA, FEMA has, if you have like this project, you have berms, levees, detention basins, you have culverts, you have pipes. So there is a group of professional engineers, geotechnical engineer, hydrologists, hydraulic engineers, mapper. They pick up these projects and they start the review. Sometimes this review, and Mark and I have done this day in, day out, is it takes FEMA quite some time, sometime year, 2, 3, even in my experience, I've seen up to 10 years. And this is all back and forth, requiring a whole bunch of information, a whole bunch of alternatives. And you have to constantly respond to this technical analysis. So you're talking about 1 to 2, 3 years to put the projects together, like Mark and his team has done. It goes to FEMA is another 1 to 3 years. So now we're about somewhere around 3 to 4 years for this project. So when FEMA finishes all his technical reviews, so there are two components to this project. One is technical, which really deal with hydrology, how much water you have, hydraulic, how deep this water is in the channel, and then mapping part of it. And the other one is administrative criteria. It can be a public notification, community review and comments, floodway publication, in Endangered Species Act. So when the whole review is finished, then FEMA is ready to review the final CLOMAR and go ahead and issue to the chief executive officer of the community, like yours, is a mayor or the designee. So the process is very extensive. The review is very detailed, and rigorous review is performed by FEMA, although the professional engineers are well versed in doing the CLOMAR, but FEMA is a final saying when it comes to the technical. So they're the one, they gotta approve that technically this project is sound engineering practice. It complies with principle of engineering and meets everyone's requirement, including local communities, other federal agencies, finally FEMA. Ron, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Now, one of the things when FEMA finishes their review, it sounds like it's really an extensive review of the technical aspects. So when they sign off on it, they're basically saying that based upon what the analysis and what you want to accomplish, the design that you have put forward meets all of the requirements and will accomplish what you want to accomplish if it is built as designed.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Here, now, Mark, let's go to the next slide. So on keeping Camarillo Springs safe, let's look at the proposed flood safety plan. Mark's going to now take over and talk about what the actual plans are that they put together, that they submitted to FEMA, that FEMA reviewed, and now are awaiting some of the final administrative part. Mark?
Great, thank you, Ron. Let's go to the next slide. And as Ron had mentioned earlier, I personally have over 30 years of experience in hydrology, floodplain mapping, FEMA remapping, and large-scale flood control projects for both public and private entities. But this kind of projects takes more than just one engineer, and at PACE, we specialize in water resource design. We are civil engineers, but with highly specialized group. There's about a total of 85 of us, and 3 of the key sort of expert engineers that were brought in on this particular project all have extensive experience in Ventura County, working in the Conejo Creek, Callegas Creek watersheds, Sespe watersheds, all within Ventura County. Bruce Phillips is a principal at PACE with over 38 years of experience in the industry. He is a noted and recognized university instructor in hydrology and hydraulics. Andrew Renau has his PhD in water resource engineering, civil engineering, and is highly expert in substantial modeling, computer modeling of hydrology, watershed mapping, floodplain mapping, and sediment transport mapping. Jenny Robinette is one of our younger engineers, still with 7 years of experience, and Jenny and Andrew have collaborated on multiple projects with Ventura County, providing Ventura County water resource engineering expertise in FEMA mapping and FEMA remapping type projects. So we're very excited to be able to have a team of experts to work within the city of Camarillo and on the Camarillo Springs project. And so when we met with New Urban West several years ago now, and we looked at the project and we looked at the existing flooding condition, and we heard what their objectives were and are for the project. You know, it's 3 simple objectives that are listed out here. The resolution of these took, as Masood had said, a long time and a lot of effort. You know, we just in the data collection and modeling and coordination with FEMA, we have over 2,500 hours just devoted to that effort. There's additional time, significant time working with the golf course architect and making sure that not only is the flood safety program resilient, but that it blends with the golf course. And in some cases, the golf course architect is really excited because we're able to improve the golf course with this project. So the 3 objectives: minimize flood risk for all of the existing residents. And there are 160 current residences, current properties that are in the mapped 100-year FEMA floodplain. And the goal is to remove all of those homes. And we say remove the homes. We don't mean remove the homes. What we mean is eliminate the flood hazard for those homes. And we'll show you how that's being done. And then do this through a project that is no cost to the existing homeowners. So those are our 3 goals. And we'll spend about the next 15 minutes kind of going through how do we accomplish that. Next slide, please. So what you're looking at here is a portion of the FEMA flood insurance rate map. Its acronym is FIRM, F-I-R-M, Flood Insurance Rate Map. And this is the map that all cities and counties, all mortgage companies, anyone looking to define and understand where the 100-year floodplain boundary is, this is the recognized source for that information. And what we see here is Conejo Creek. Let me just back up. So here's the 101. I think everybody can see the 101 symbols there. The ridge view is here. You have your Camarillo Springs Drive entry road and the clubhouse area here, just so you have a frame of reference of where do we sit. And Conejo Creek is the primary flooding source for all of this area. And everything shaded in this light blue is part of the current 100-year floodplain. The majority of that 100-year floodplain comes from the banks of the Conejo Creek overflowing during a large flood event. And as we've shown with these flow arrows, flow expands out and inundates this entire area. There is the Conejo Creek watershed is just under 50,000 acres of land that all the rain that falls on there passes under the 101, and it passes by the project site. The Camarillo Springs Creek, which is this watershed off here to the east, is a much smaller watershed. It's 1,000 acres, but still delivers water to the golf course, to the community that needs to be managed. And as Conejo Creek continues on past the project site, it then converges with Callegas Creek, and it continues on out to the Pacific Ocean. And so this is the baseline where we start from as an existing condition showing the 100-year floodplain. Let's go to the next slide, which the next slide is going to show us a comparison of, on the left will be this a zoomed in version of this existing floodplain area, kind of just focused on the project site. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that same map with the green areas where through the project improvements, through the flood safety program, these 4 green areas will be the flood hazard, the 100-year flood hazard will no longer inundate those 4 areas of land. And so how do we do that? That's on the next slide. So there are 3 kind of primary components to the flood safety program. First and foremost is a substantial earthen barrier that is to be constructed along Ridgeview Street to keep that stormwater that overflows the Conejo Creek bank, to keep that from flowing into the golf course area. And then the second portion of it is a bypass. And it's a bypass to take high flows from Camarillo Springs Creek directly out to Conejo Creek. So we don't allow all of those high flows to go through the golf course area. And we do want the smaller flows because we want to capture those to keep the lakes full, to store water for irrigation, and to allow water to infiltrate into the groundwater aquifer. So 1 is the barrier, 2 is the bypass, and then 3 is the basin. And the basin is using the south golf course area to hold floodwaters that were previously held in the north golf area where the homes are. There's no homes around the south area, so we can allow that area. It doesn't flood any higher than it did, but we store more water there in the proposed condition than we did in the existing condition. And so we'll spend time looking at each of these elements: the barrier, the bypass, and the basin, the 3 Bs of the project flood management system. And so from here, we can see a detailed map of the project site. And just to make sure that everyone has a frame of reference, the 101 freeway is right up here. And Camarillo Springs Drive, your entrance to your community, is right here. The guard gate is here. The golf course clubhouse parking lot is here. The clubhouse is here. And so the first component of our flood management system is the berm that we talked about. And that berm connects all the way from the hill, from a high point at the westerly location, and it continues all the way to high ground at the easterly end of the project. And so that keeps these overflows from Conejo Creek from entering the project. And that's critical so that we don't have these higher flood waters that are associated with Conejo Creek. We don't allow those into the project, and we don't allow them to flood the existing homes or the new senior housing area. So that's accomplished through the berm. You can see that it's kind of the primary backbone of the flood safety system. So the next portion of it is the bypass, right? We said number 1 is the berm, number 2 is the bypass. And so the bypass is this, represented by this yellow line that you see here. And the inlet to the bypass is right here, just on the west side of Camarillo Springs Drive. The outlet is all the way over here to the west at Conejo Creek. And so we said what that does is that picks up the Camarillo Springs runoff that comes under a culvert at Ador and flows through the golf course. This orange area that we're showing here just upstream of Camarillo Springs Drive, that is a debris basin that has a capacity to store 20 acre feet, which is a very large volume of both sediment and debris and flood storage. Because and this is a key element, the debris basin is a key element of the bypass, because one of the things that we have to do with the bypass is to ensure that no debris gets in the bypass and clogs the bypass pipe. And so by having this large storage area upstream of the Camarillo Springs Drive, we have significant storage. We eliminate any potential for debris, sediment, large branches and trees, and anything that can come down off the mountains that would get to the golf course area. It can't get to the splitting basin here. And the splitting basin is the major flows, the major high flows here go into the bypass, and the smaller, more frequent flows are allowed to go out into the golf course, flow into the lakes, they refill the lakes. And then there is a overflow pipe at the north end of the north and west end of the lakes that allows flow to exit as long as Conejo Creek floodwaters have receded. And Conejo Creek has a large 100-year flow. There's over 23,000 cubic feet per second. And that it's kind of, when you think about that, it's sometimes hard to describe and understand what that means. But I like to really describe it as a cubic foot is about the size of a basketball. And the flow rate, the peak of the 100-year storm that's going to come by and pass through Conejo Creek, it's made up of these 23,000 basketballs moving past the through the creek area. And what we do with the bypass is keep that out. We have small flows that are in the North Gulf area and remain there until the peak of this flow recedes in Conejo Creek, and then the small flows are outletted, and the large flows are conveyed in the bypass culvert. And this bypass culvert is 6 feet high and 10 feet wide. So you have a significant, 600 square feet of opening to pass flows through. And it has high velocity in there, and so any of the lighter debris that get in there, leaves and cups and things like that, they'll get washed out. Even with a small flow event, there's high velocity in the bypass culvert to push those through.
Okay, hey, Mark.
Yes, sir.
One question on the debris basin before we hit the input. Now that's not, as far as aesthetics, that's not a big concrete debris basin, right?
Not at all, Ron. Thank you. Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, we spent literally hundreds of hours working with the golf course architect to ensure that we first and foremost had to meet flood safety. I mean, as a registered professional engineer, I am obligated to, first and foremost provide for public safety. But we've had an opportunity to work on, literally hundreds of golf courses, and we understand golf course architects and what they're trying to do, and we worked with the golf course architect and really developed a plan here that allows this sediment basin. You can see the shape of it. It's not square, it's not round, it's not circular. It's very contoured, and it works well as an out of play area for the golf course. And the golf architect was really excited about kind of how the change affected here, and it actually, in his words, improved golf safety because of the way the golf tees and greens had been reoriented, and there will not be any obstruction of views for the houses on the south side. That the views will be the same and possibly even improved, because there'll be lots of landscaping associated with the basins, and the same with any of the homes on the north side. No obstruction of views. All of this is lowered area. The debris basin is a lowered area, and so we've worked really hard with the golf course architect to integrate this flood safety solution so that the quality of the golf and the experience and the views, even for people who don't play golf, are equal or enhanced to what the current condition is.
Great. So flood safety does not have to be ugly.
Not at all. Not at all. And so we talked about the berm, the barrier. We talked about the bypass. And the third component of the flood safety program is utilization of the southern Gulf area as additional flood storage for Conejo Creek. Because when we come up here and we build the berm, well, we've eliminated the floodplain, the Conejo Creek floodplain, from being able to get past Ridgeview. And so we've taken some area out of floodplain storage, some volume out of floodplain storage, and we needed to provide that back. And the way we do that is to go into the south area, the South Gulf area, that doesn't have houses around it, and we utilize the space in between the Gulf. So the Gulf is the green areas, and the blue areas that are in between will be flooded with smaller storm events. 5-year events will come in and flood those. The Gulf, the tees and the greens all stay up above the 100-year event. But the fairways, like in a 20-year event, the fairways will start to see some water on those. But like I mentioned earlier, flooding in Conejo Creek, there's a high peak, but it doesn't last very long. And within 48 hours, the South Gulf area would be back to kind of a normal level, and only the low flows that continue on in Conejo Creek would be coming in and out of the South Basin area. So that's the summary of the 3 B's that make up the flood safety program for the project: the barrier, the bypass, and the basin. A couple of things oh yeah, I've showed it kind of once, but maybe it helps. So we're kind of right above Conejo Creek, and we're looking to the east. And the floodwaters from the Conejo Creek, I mean, you can even kind of see almost how, the floodwaters have washed across Ridgeview, in this picture, right? They're headed this way. And what our flood safety program does is it connects the high ground of this hill in the foreground and continues on. My line's crooked, but the berm won't be wiggly like my line, but it connects high ground, at this point, with high ground. So high ground on the east to high ground on the west. And that stops the flows from Conejo Creek from entering the project and eliminates the flooding at high elevation for all of these homes. And then the bypass pipe picks up flow off of the mountains. I'm going to get my blue pen back here. So there's flow coming off the mountains for Camarillo Springs. And we pick that up in our debris basin and in our bypass pipeline. And that pipeline runs through the proposed project and comes along, and it outlets into Conejo Creek. So that yellow line represents the upstream circle, the debris basin, and then the line represents the bypass pipeline, the bypass culvert, the 6-foot high, 10-foot wide bypass culvert that keeps the high flows from Camarillo Springs portion of the watershed from coming into the North Gulf area and impacting the Springs and the CCV and the Courtyard homes. It probably is worth mentioning that the 2014 debris flow that happened, really happened from based on an extreme set of circumstances, a terrible fire, and then an extremely high rainfall event. For that localized area, over 2 inches of rain in less than a 30-minute period. That actually even exceeds the 100-year rainfall, just from an intensity standpoint. And that kind of flow really won't, that's been addressed by the city by stabilizing that hillside. But if any of those flows were ever, any of that debris were ever to get into the golf course or into the debris basin, there is more than adequate room for storage of any kind of volume like that within the debris basin before it would get into the bypass pipeline. Okay, so
Now, just a couple of questions, Mark. On the berm, the berm is really I guess the north side of the pad, right? So yeah.
That's right. The proposed development area, yeah, is up in here, and relative to Ridgeview, the top of this berm is probably 6 to 9 feet higher than the current Ridgeview grade. And I think we have a photograph kind of on the next slide that just gives you an idea of what that's going to look like. Again, it's not a big ugly concrete structure because we have such a wide berm. We don't have to have erosion protection. There's not a lot of high velocity, and so off here to the right, this is a nearby landscaped area, but you could see Ridgeview could be the street over here to the right, and you have a slope, that goes up this hill, and it's a fairly gradual slope, plenty enough to be landscaped and to look really nice, and so from Ridgeview street grade up to the top of the berm, that's where I'm saying that's somewhere between 6 and 9 feet, depending on, because the Ridgeview Road is not perfectly flat or anything like that. It goes up and down a little bit. And so there'll be about 6 to 9 feet in the top of the berm will be higher than Ridgeview Road.
And the bypass, all of that will be under that pad. Right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Okay, so I can talk a long time about all of these different elements, but I hope that you got a good summary there, Ron.
Yeah, great. And I think just going over the plan highlights, what impressed me, and Masuda talked to this, the degree and the extent of the FEMA reviews. It's nearly 2 years of review by FEMA experts. I know there's a lot of back and forth questions on reviewing the data, reviewing how the data was gathered, reviewing the analysis of the data. Over 2,500 hours of data gathering, modeling, and design work. It's designed to handle a 100-year event, where the pictures that we had from 1983 were a 22-year event. It meets all the federal requirements for safety and effectiveness, and it's a comprehensive solution for flooding at Camarillo Springs. And I think what isn't on here, because it's not part of the technical analysis, but I think it's very important to all of us who are watching this now, is if the project is approved and if this is implemented, then 160 homes will no longer be in the floodplain, and that will be at no cost to those existing homeowners. All of this will be borne by the project, and all of it will be incorporated as part of the cost of the project that's passed on to the new homeowners.
And Ron, just a couple things to add on to that.
Okay.
That was a great summary. Yeah. So yes, it was nearly 2 years of review with FEMA, and it is a very detailed review process. I mean, it's a quite rigorous process that is followed throughout the nation, and it requires us as the engineer of record to go back to the very beginning and look at the watershed and determine flow rates, and then we have that to compare to both what FEMA has published, flood insurance studies for each of these watersheds where they have mapping, and so they go through a process to publish that information. The county of Ventura has also done studies, and so our review process is us doing the work as independent experts and professional engineers licensed by the state of California to submit that to FEMA and to submit that to the county for independent review there. And so it's quite a rigorous process, and it does take a significant amount of time. And then in addition to design for the 100-year storm, there's also, it's not designed, it's not like, okay, the 101-year storm is going to cause it to overtop. FEMA is about statistics and insurance, and so there's a significant amount of redundancy and factor of safety that's put into all of the elements of a system like this. So that it's designed to handle much more than a 100-year storm, but the 100-year storm is the design criteria. But then there's factors of safety that's put on top of that. Just like a bridge would be designed, you don't want an overloaded truck to go across the bridge. Well, it can handle an overloaded truck, but you don't want to keep doing that to the bridge. And so it's just like that. This flood safety system can handle storms in excess of 100-year, but that's not the design criteria for it.
Thank you. Masood, on this next one, I think we've said FEMA completes the technical review. One of the questions is that after FEMA has completed the technical review, the administrative tasks are complete. Maybe we can discuss what those tasks remaining are, and they issue a CLOMR. Then how is that safety then ensured? Oh, Masood, I think you're.
Okay.
There we go.
I had it on mute.
I could read your lips, but okay.
Hi again. Thanks, Ron. Like Mark talked about his design. The design is not only for 100 years. There is an added factor of safety when it comes to the hydraulics, design of culverts, design of levees. FEMA has a very, very detailed requirement when it comes to LOMARs and CLOMARs. And they want to make sure the design is for benefit, for safety of the residents that undertaking this project. So a lot of back and forth, a lot of the detail, and this is common all over United States. I work all over United States, and I see that. And in my prior to starting my own company, I work as a contractor to FEMA. I used to see this type of project all over, south, north, east, west, Hawaiian Islands, Samoa. Wherever you go, you are treated the same way when it comes to these CLOMARs and LOMARs, and rigorous review of this data. So then there is a component of the technical and non-technical, we call it administrative. So the check mark is the majority of the work, almost all of them are completed. So the technical is the most important things, not saying the administrative is not. One of the items under administrative, I think we're waiting for the city to prepare a letter that is deal with Endangered Species Act. And then I believe there's operation and maintenance that needed for FEMA to issue a CLOMAR. So at any point, those information is available, sent to FEMA. FEMA probably take a short time to review those two pieces of information and issue a CLOMAR. CLOMAR, as we said, is an official letter from FEMA that it says they have reviewed the project, it's sound engineering practice, meets all of our requirements, including the local permittings, any other federal agency involved. So when it comes to issuing that CLOMAR is the work is done. So the proposed project meets all the aspect of design and federal regulatory compliance.
Okay.
And
Thank you very much.
go ahead. The next run is, so Clomar is done. So project is ready to be constructed after obtaining permits, local, and you complete the project. You go back to FEMA and you provide Mark's team right after the project is completed. They got to do the final survey and as-built the plans, and it said the project is completed. They put their sign and seal, and FEMA review the LOMAR and revise the map, issue a letter, and it goes through the 90 days appeal period. And when it's done, the map is changed, and whoever has the flood insurance, they always can go to the lender. They said, we are out of the floodplain. Again, it is a prerogative of lender either to release people from continue buying the expensive flood insurance, or they can buy a cheaper flood insurance. I don't live in a 100-year floodplain, not even a 500-year floodplain. I have a premium that is about $450 a year. So that's a safety factor that I use in order to protect my property. But you are not obligated to buy a flood insurance unless the lender force you to do that. Then you can buy a cheaper flood insurance. Just last thing, I mean, you hear that this project not only is going to protect the resident from flooding, more importantly, you know, for this, for the time that I worked for FEMA contractor, I never seen a developer to come in and actually help to remove the zone designation for existing structure for free. So with that note, back to you, Ron.
Yeah. I think very early on, we had learned that the rule is you can't make it worse. But with this, it's going to make it one heck of a lot better.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Masoud. Appreciate it. I think we're ready for the next. And we're ready for some Q&A. Let's see, do we have any? The moderator, do we have any questions? Oh, here we go. From Mark. What is the difference between the 22-year level flood and a 100-year level flood event?
You know, there was no specific recording of like the elevation of that flood, but in general, because it spreads out so wide, it's not a lot different. It might be like 2 feet, 1 to 2 feet difference between a 22-year flood and a 100-year flood.
Thank you. Also for Mark, as water is piped from golf hole area into creek and farmland, are farmland property owners aware and okay with that extra water?
Yeah, maybe we could go back to the kind of the project plan, because water's not really being discharged into any of the farmland. Let me get my pen here. Yeah, so the outlet from the bypass is here, and so you know, really the only thing that's happening is this flow that was coming across Ridgeview, you know, doesn't come across Ridgeview, but it doesn't cause an impact, and that's one of the things we spent a lot of time in FEMA and the county both really. You know, we use not just one-dimensional hydraulic models, but two-dimensional hydraulic models, kind of the very state-of-the-art for the industry in computer modeling, to show that you know, there are no adverse impacts to any offsite property owners. So it's not like we're directing the flow out onto somebody else. We're directing the flow back into Conejo Creek.
And again, I think that statement applies. What FEMA looks at is you can't make anyone else's flood situation worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they look at that, you know, with a very, very fine-tooth comb.
Okay, thank you. I had another question, Mark. It said if flood control flaps from the end of the pipes are shut by backflow, where does the water flood to?
So the only backflow, right? Because the way the bypass works, and that's a really, I mean, as somebody who really understands the system, the bypass pipe doesn't have any restriction on it. So there's no flaps. There's no. I'm going to erase this and let's make it a little clearer. The outflow from the bypass culvert, it is a free outflow, and it's because we collect the water at a higher elevation all the way back here where we let the water go into the bypass, and so it's higher. You know, this whole bypass pipeline is sloped. You know, it falls as it goes to the west, and when we do that, that means it's higher than at the upstream end where we start. It's much higher than the highest 100-year water level of Conejo Creek. So it forces water out that pipe. It forces water out that culvert. And so the only backflow preventer or flap gate, that has to happen here at the lake overflow, right? And so we said that only small flows are allowed to come in. And so we store roughly about 90 acre feet, you know, in this Gulf and Lake area in the 100-year event. And then as the flow in Conejo Creek passes, as that peak flow passes and the flood level drops down, then flow is able to leave the lake storage area.
And I think you said even for the basins where it is stored, that the design basically says that the water will be evacuated, you said within 48 hours?
48 hours, right.
Let's see, what is the berm made of? Just soil?
The berm is soil, yes. And because again, there's not a lot of velocity, you know, there's not big flow happening along Ridgeview because the flow is coming out of Conejo Creek and spreading. The big velocity are in the direction parallel. So we don't have to worry so much about erosion on the berm. And then the fact that it's not a narrow berm, it's a very wide berm. You know, it's essentially the width of the proposed senior housing area.
Okay. We have another quick, couple more quick questions. Mark, how can we be sure the correct numbers for the safety plan were used?
Yeah, as I mentioned, Ron, I mean, as a professional engineer, when we make the submittal to FEMA, we have to use our license registration and stamp that document, which means we can't rely on others' information. We have to thoroughly start from the beginning and go through that process. And so not only do we have our internal quality control checks and balances, then it also goes through the county's process, the county's review process, and FEMA's review process. So, and each of those agencies, as I mentioned, they have significant amount of data that we have to compare ours to and to compare our results to, and so we have, you know, kind of three levels of quality control: our own, the counties, and FEMA's.
Okay, good. And then how is all this going to be maintained? We were going to talk about that a little later, but what about maintenance?
So maintenance for you know, flood control facilities, FEMA requires that be by a governmental agency. It can't be maintained by a private entity or a homeowners association. And so in this case, it would either be maintained by the county or the city or another governmental agency that the city would sanction.
Okay. And they would probably, as I understand it, from discussions, they would probably put up some sort of special assessment district to cover the cost of that maintenance. And all of that would be assessed to the new homeowners, and the proposed senior district, it would not be assessed to existing homeowners.
That is how New Urban West is proposing this to be done. I mean, it as Masood said, I mean, it's pretty rare for a private development company to remove the floodplain from existing residential areas, but I think they see that the benefit of it, and it's a huge benefit to the community, and therefore they're proceeding with it that way.
It is. Matter of fact, as I understand it, this is adding about $3 million in cost to the project doing this. But we appreciate it. Just two more quick questions. I guess I can answer this one, and you guys can chime in. Does this flood improvement get completed even if New Urban West plan is rejected by the city? And that answer is no. This is part of the project that's been submitted. If that project is approved, then this flood mitigation will take place as part of the project. If the project is not approved, then no construction will be done, and none of the flood mitigation will be built. So, which gives us, the last question came in and says, how can we tell the city to approve the project? It's, what we're trying to do is give you the information to make informed decisions. If you like what you heard regarding the flood, if you like what you hear regarding the golf course plans, then make the city council aware of it. The city council has the final vote. It'll probably take place sometime September, October when it comes up before them. So it's make your opinions known to the city council, and Sean Mulcahy is our city council representative, but the full city council. Just to run through this real quick, we're a little over. Apologize. Just some of the plan highlights. First of all, it removes all of the existing residents from the flood hazard zone, not physically. It redefines the flood map. It has extensive FEMA encounter review requiring expert analysis and technical data. We talked about that. 2 years, 2,500 hours. Potential elimination of flood insurance or reduction of premiums. The map will be changed if it is approved and built out. Now, certain lenders may have requirements, but there is no FEMA requirement for you to have it. And it will be no cost to existing residents. The building will not be any cost, nor the maintenance will be any cost. And long-term maintenance is by a public agency or maintenance district, and that assessment district will go to the new home ownership. It will not go to existing residents. So I wanted to just take a minute and thank Mark and Masood for walking us through the process. It's very complicated, very technical, but I think they did it in a way that's understandable to us. And I think the work that PACE has done has been unbelievable. I know I heard their name taken in vain a couple of times by the golf course design team, as they were saying we need more water storage. Redesign the golf course a little to accommodate it. But what they've come up with is a plan which, as we said, will alleviate Camarillo Springs from the flooding issues that we've had in the past, and then remove 160 of those homeowners from the flood. If you have additional questions, just go to preservecamarillo-springs-golf.org. You can ask questions there, and we'll get back to you. And just wanted to thank everyone who's attended. Again, thank Mark and Masood. Thank New Urban West for making them available to answer our questions and to explain what's going on. Again, what the advisory committee is dedicated to is really coordinating information and making sure the information flows well between us the residents, between the developer, and between the city, so that everyone has the best information possible in order to make an informed decision. You know, whether you're for it, whether you're against it, let's just make sure that we have the facts and we're making an informed decision. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, go to the website and we'll be glad to answer those offline. Thank you very much. Good night.